There is a strange ache in carrying wounds that others refuse to admit they caused. It's a silent pain, not because you choose silence, but because they do. The ones who cause the harm move through life as though they are innocent. They wear their smiles with ease, laugh freely in rooms where your name may still echo with hurt, and carry no trace of guilt for the scars that still ache in your chest. And yet, you, the one who was hurt, are left to carry the responsibility of healing, quietly, patiently, alone. It is a lonely thing to bandage your own wounds while watching others pretend the blade was never in their hand. And perhaps the most painful part of all is not the wound itself, but the denial of it, the rewriting of truth, the silent accusations that you're too sensitive or that you misunderstood, when all along you remember the sharpness of every word, every betrayal, every abandonment, and yet they walk past your pain as though it never existed, as if you invented it. But here's a truth the world doesn't often speak about. God sees what they pretend not to see. When they turn their face away from what they've done, He does not. When they minimize your pain, He does not. When they act holy while holding secret cruelties, God sees through the mask. He is not fooled by theatrics or public displays of kindness that contradict private cruelty. You see, when people refuse to acknowledge what they've done, they do not erase the wound. They only leave you to clean the mess with your own hands. And while you are down there picking up the shattered pieces, aching and weeping in the dark, God is near, not as a distant observer, but as a witness, a comforter, and a righteous judge. Healing from what someone pretends they didn't do is not just a physical or emotional process. It's spiritual warfare. It's resisting the lie that your pain is imaginary. It's refusing to gaslight yourself just because others won't carry their share of the truth. It's learning to trust God more than you trust the applause they receive or the innocence they perform. Sometimes, the world celebrates the ones who caused harm because they're charismatic, because they speak well, because they look kind. But God is not impressed by performance. He is drawn to truth, and when you heal in silence, He hears every tear as if it were a prayer. He stores every ache like a sacred offering. You may be healing quietly, but you are not healing unseen. And it's here, in the depth of your silent restoration, that God is working. Not just to comfort you, but to correct the injustice. Not just to mend your heart, but to hold them accountable. They may act like they never caused the wound, but God knows, He remembers. This healing journey you're on, it's not weak, it's brave. It's spiritual resistance in a world where truth is often buried for convenience. And every time you get back up, every time you forgive without denying the truth, every time you move forward even when they won't apologize, heaven takes note. Because this isn't just about you and them. It's about you and God. And make no mistake, God is not passive in this process. He does not let those who cause harm and then hide from it walk away untouched forever. There is a season for everything under the sun. And the season of pretending always ends. The masks fall, the stories collapse, and the truth, it always finds its voice. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to expose them. You don't have to demand anything. Just keep healing. Just keep trusting. Just keep walking. Because your pain is not invisible and your healing is not in vain. God is witness to what they deny. There is a quiet kind of suffering that comes from knowing the truth while watching someone else rewrite it before your very eyes. When the ones who hurt you act like they never did, It's more than just dishonest. It's a second wound layered over the first. And yet, in that ache, in that cruel revision of the past, there is one truth that will not bend. God was there. You may have cried alone, but you were not unseen. You may have bled from invisible wounds, but you were not uncovered. When they raised their voice to break your spirit, when they turned their back when you needed them most, when they threw words like daggers and then smiled like saints, God was there. He is not a spectator. He is not blind to what the world chooses to ignore. His presence is not limited to churches and chapels. It walks with you in betrayal. It kneels with you in heartbreak. It weeps with you when you're dismissed and silenced. When people erase their part in your pain, God remembers every detail. Not because He wants you to stay trapped in it, but because He wants you to heal with truth, not lies. And healing must begin with the truth. The ones who deny what they did might sleep soundly. They might post pictures with smiles, give speeches about integrity, and seem as if they've moved on. But what is performance before the eyes of the Almighty? God sees beyond the filters. He hears what's whispered behind closed doors. He knows the motives that hide behind good intentions. And most of all, He knows what it took for you to survive what they won't even acknowledge. There's something sacred in knowing that God doesn't just see your actions. He sees your heart. He knows the nights you almost gave up, the mornings you woke up asking why, the prayers you whispered through clenched teeth. He remembers it all, and He honors it, even when others dismiss it. So, when they act like your pain is exaggerated, when they shrug off the damage they did, when they gather applause for being someone they never were with you, don't be shaken. Their denial does not silence God. Their forgetfulness does not cancel what heaven recorded. And the same way they denied your suffering, God will deny them the satisfaction of escaping accountability. Because healing isn't just about you getting better. It's about justice being made whole. And no healing is complete until heaven has answered the denial with truth. That truth may not always come through confrontation. It may not even come through apologies, but it will come through peace, through restoration, through the way God lifts you in quiet defiance of the story they tried to erase. You are not crazy, you are not dramatic, you are not bitter, you are seen. Their denial cannot cancel your truth. Truth is not dependent on acknowledgement. It doesn't become less true just because someone refuses to name it. And yet, how often do we feel erased, invalidated, or invisible when those who harmed us act like nothing ever happened? It's a strange form of emotional gaslighting. They smile in front of others, pretending nothing went wrong, while your soul is still stitching itself back together from the moments they ripped you apart. But let this truth anchor you. Their denial does not cancel what you lived through. Your tears were real. Your confusion was real. The betrayal, the manipulation, the neglect, all of it happened. And the fact that you are still standing, still breathing, still believing, that is a testament to your strength and to God's sustaining power. You are not here because they made it easy. You are here because you refused to let their denial define your destiny. When someone refuses to acknowledge what they've done, it's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their lack of courage. It takes bravery to face the damage you've caused. It takes integrity to apologize. But pretending something never happened requires nothing but cowardice wrapped in convenience. So don't wait for them to admit it before you allow yourself to heal. Don't give them the power to pause your progress. And most importantly, don't tie your truth to their timeline. The day they finally acknowledge the truth may never come. But that doesn't mean your truth isn't true. You know what you lived through, and God does too. Your truth is sacred because it was written in the fire. You were changed by the experience, not because it was fair, but because you chose to grow when you could have hardened. You chose to pray when you could have cursed. You chose to walk away instead of retaliate. And that choice matters deeply in the eyes of heaven. Sometimes the most dangerous thing someone can do isn't hurting you. It's pretending they didn't, because in that moment they attempt to silence your story. But you are not a story they get to write anymore. You're not a chapter in their convenience. You are the author of your healing, and God is the co-writer of your restoration. So speak your truth, not to convince them, but to free yourself, not to hurt them, but to honor the one who endured it all. You don't need their confession to confirm your pain. You have your scars. You have your prayers. You have your growth. And above all, you have a God who saw everything they refused to admit. Healing in silence invites divine presence. There is a unique sacredness in the kind of healing that happens when no one claps for you, when no one acknowledges your strength, when the very people who caused the pain go on living untouched, unaware, or unwilling to take responsibility, and you are left in the aftermath, stitching yourself back together with faith as your only thread. It is in this silence, when the world forgets you, that God draws nearest. Some wounds don't get healed through conversations or apologies. Some wounds are so deep, so personal, that they require a different kind of balm, the balm of divine intimacy. And sometimes it's only when you've been abandoned, misunderstood, or betrayed that you begin to experience this intimacy in its rawest form. When you lie awake in the dark with your questions, your sorrow, your confusion, He meets you there, not always with answers, but always with presence. In the noise of the world, we often imagine healing must be loud, that justice must be public, that vindication must be seen. But God often works in reverse. What the world calls hidden, He calls holy. What the world overlooks, He values deeply. He's not interested in applause. He's interested in truth. And when you choose to walk the path of healing in silence, not because you want to, but because you have no choice, you step onto sacred ground. Every tear cried in private is seen. Every time you forgave them in your heart just to make peace with yourself, it was recorded. Every time you resisted bitterness, though the wound begged you to hate, that was a holy act. Because to heal in silence is to trust that God is working where others refuse to act. It is to place your heart in the hands of the one who created it. And that's not weakness. That's power. The power of restraint. The power of faith. The power of walking forward even when the weight of injustice pulls you backward. You don't need an audience to be transformed. You need truth. You need grace. You need the quiet fire of God's Spirit working in the hidden places, refining you while the world sleeps. The people who hurt you may never sit in your pain. They may never say, "I'm sorry." They may never carry a single ounce of what you've had to carry. But that doesn't mean God won't stand in the space they left empty. He does. He always has. He doesn't need the crowd to see it. He only needs your heart to be open. So if you find yourself healing in silence, take heart. That silence is not empty. It is filled with the whispers of heaven. It is the quiet room where angels walk gently, where divine strength replaces the shattered pieces, and it is the place where God does His most meaningful work. Spiritual wounds require spiritual healing. Not all pain is physical. Not all wounds bleed where the eyes can see. Some wounds live deep in the soul, where words once lived, where trust once bloomed, where love once breathed freely. When someone who was close to you, someone you trusted, turns into the source of your pain, it doesn't just leave emotional damage, it leaves a spiritual fracture, and those cannot be healed by human effort alone. What happens to the spirit when betrayal enters through the heart? When kindness is met with manipulation, when vulnerability is answered with exploitation? It begins to question everything, not just the person, but the meaning of love, of trust, of goodness itself. That's why these kinds of wounds are the hardest to heal. They require something deeper than closure or explanation. They require spiritual restoration. You cannot heal a spiritual wound with worldly logic. You cannot explain it away, distract yourself out of it, or numb it with temporary pleasures. These are the kinds of wounds that drive a soul to its knees, and that is where true healing begins. At the altar, in prayer, in surrender, in groans too deep for words. God is not only the healer of the body, He is the mender of the soul. He knows the ache of being misunderstood, betrayed and denied because He lived it. And that's why He meets you in your own agony with tenderness, not just sympathy. He's not just a listener, He is a restorer, and His restoration doesn't come through noise. It comes through moments of quiet revelation. Have you ever felt Him in your tears? Have you ever noticed how, even in your most broken moments, there was still something holding you together? That was His hand. You thought you were falling apart, but in truth, something inside you was being rebuilt, not in your image, but in His. The beauty of spiritual healing is that it leaves you stronger than you were before. Not harder, not colder, but wiser, deeper, more rooted in who God says you are, not what others did to you. It gives you eyes to see beyond the surface. It teaches you discernment. It shows you the danger of placing your identity in people who never had the capacity to love you rightly. So if you feel like your healing is slow, like your heart is taking too long to recover, be patient. Spiritual healing is not rushed. God doesn't use bandages. He rebuilds from the foundation. And He takes His time because He's not trying to make you function. He's trying to make you whole. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not too wounded to be loved. You are simply being healed in the deepest part of yourself. And that kind of healing requires the touch of a holy hand. God holds memory even when they pretend. There's a moment, a subtle, haunting one, when the person who hurt you starts living like it never happened. They laugh without guilt. They thrive without remorse. They walk through life untouched by the wreckage they left behind. And that, perhaps, is one of the cruelest forms of pain, when someone not only wounds you, but dares to erase the evidence and rewrite the narrative. But here's what your soul needs to remember. God has not forgotten what they so desperately want to bury. Their silence does not erase the event. Their smiles do not scrub away the consequences. Their rebranded personality does not fool heaven. What they did to your heart, the betrayal, the manipulation, the backstabbing, is not forgotten. Not by the one who records every tear, every cry, every collapse of your spirit behind closed doors. God remembers. This isn't the kind of memory that seeks revenge. No, it's a holy memory, a just memory, a memory rooted in love for you, not hatred for them. It's a memory that guards your truth when others deny it. It's the kind of memory that cradles you while they call you bitter for remembering. It's the divine awareness that refuses to let injustice be rebranded as misunderstanding. You may find yourself doubting what happened, because that's what gaslighting does. You start asking, was it really that bad? Or maybe I overreacted, especially when they move on as if nothing ever occurred. But the presence of God remains, gently anchoring you to reality. You were not crazy, you were not too much. You were harmed, and He saw it all. The ones who walk away often carry none of the weight. That's because they're not interested in redemption. They're invested in escape. They don't want to face the mirror, they want to run from it. But God doesn't let people escape truth forever. He doesn't shout it aloud. He waits. He lets their own choices catch up with them. He allows silence to grow louder than any confession ever could. And while they move on without memory, God is writing a different kind of story for you. One built on restoration. One that honors the depth of your pain and the resilience it took to keep breathing through it. One where the past is not erased, but transformed. That's what divine memory does. It redeems. It doesn't cling to pain. It builds from it. So rest in the knowledge that your wounds are not dismissed in heaven. They are remembered, not to hold you back, but to push you forward into something more honest, more beautiful, and more holy. While they pretend, God protects. While they forget, God restores. While they rewrite, God remembers. And in the end, only His memory matters. Justice may be delayed, but it is never denied. There is a deep ache in watching someone who hurt you prosper while you are still healing. They seem to get everything: praise, support, admiration, while you are left rebuilding from ruins they caused. It almost feels like injustice has won, like goodness is punished and cruelty is rewarded. But this is where faith must rise. What is delayed is not denied, especially not with God. God's justice doesn't operate on the clock of man. He doesn't rush to make things look fair for appearances. He doesn't balance scales with public opinion. He watches, He weighs, and He waits. Not because He is passive, but because He is perfect. Perfect in timing, perfect in righteousness, perfect in judgment. Those who caused harm and walked away may think they've escaped the consequences, but God is not deceived by distance. He knows how to revisit what's been left undone, not out of vengeance, but out of divine order. He will not allow injustice to sit unchallenged forever, and when He moves, He doesn't miss. It may not come in the form of public humiliation. It may not arrive with thunder or lightning, but it will come. Sometimes through loss, sometimes through loneliness, sometimes through the painful realization of what they threw away. But however it arrives, and while justice is being prepared, God is preparing you. He doesn't just deal with what they did, He develops who you're becoming. That's what makes His justice complete. He doesn't just pay them back, He lifts you up. He doesn't just correct the story, He redeems the storyteller. This delay in justice you're experiencing, it's not neglect, it's protection. God is ensuring that when justice arrives, it doesn't destroy you, it completes you. Because real justice is not about seeing them fall, it's about seeing you rise in truth, dignity, and peace. So while they boast, while they lie, while they pretend, stay still, keep healing, keep trusting. The one who holds time in His hand has not forgotten your suffering. He is not passive, He is precise. And when He moves, it won't be to match their noise. It will be to silence it with undeniable truth. You don't have to carry revenge in your heart. You don't have to wait for their fall to feel whole. just walk in peace knowing this. God's justice is not always quick, but it is always exact. There's a silence that follows betrayal, not the peaceful kind, but the aching, hollow kind, the kind that sits in your chest like a weight, the kind that makes your thoughts feel louder than they should be, the kind that arrives not because you chose it, but because someone who once claimed to care left you in it. They walked away from accountability. They smiled like nothing ever happened. They crafted a life built on denial, and in doing so they left you surrounded by an echoing silence, one filled with unspoken words, unhealed wounds, and unanswered questions. And yet, here you are, still breathing in that silence, still moving despite it. That alone is not weakness, that is power. That is proof that your spirit, though wounded, has not died. You see, the silence they left you with was not just emotional, it was spiritual. It was the void where comfort should have been, the gap between what you needed and what they chose not to give. But what they didn't know is that silence does not only break, it can also build. When you stop trying to get them to see, when you stop pleading to be understood, when you stop waiting for them to make it right, that's when the rebuilding begins. It's in that space of divine quiet where God begins to speak, not with noise, but with clarity, not with fury, but with truth. It's in that lonely silence that you find your voice, a voice not shaped by their perception of you, but by the God who formed you, a voice that stops apologizing for existing, a voice that begins to say, I deserved better, not out of bitterness, but out of holy realization. And in that holy silence, something changes. You no longer crave validation from the ones who minimized your pain. You no longer chase closure from those who only offer confusion. You begin to understand that rising doesn't require their permission. It doesn't need their apology. It doesn't need their support. It only needs your agreement with the truth that you are not who they left behind. You are who God is lifting up. Every tear you cried in that silence watered something sacred. Every night you stayed up wrestling with why prepared your soul to receive a deeper who you are, who God is, who He is calling you to become. And what emerges from that kind of silence is not just a healed version of you, it's a transformed one. You begin to walk differently, not arrogantly, but assured. You begin to forgive, not because they earned it, but because you refuse to carry their weight into your freedom. You begin to dream again, not out of naivety, but because you finally understand that your future doesn't belong to people who refuse to respect your past. The silence they left you in may have felt like abandonment, but it became the very soil in which your resurrection began. And resurrection is not for the faint of heart. It is for those who endure the death of relationships, the burial of expectations, and still rise stronger, wiser, and more grounded in God than ever before. You won't stay where they left you. You won't rot in the silence they thought would destroy you. Because when God steps into the silence, He doesn't just comfort, He calls. He calls you to rise. He calls you to move forward. He calls you out of the grave of their denial and into the garden of His restoration. And when you rise different. You rise with discernment. You rise with boundaries. You rise with peace that confuses those who thought you'd crumble. You rise not to prove them wrong, but to prove that what they meant for harm, God has used for glory. So no, they may never admit what they did. They may continue to act like the wound doesn't exist, but that doesn't change what God is doing in the silence. They left behind because silence in their world is absence. But silence in God's world is preparation. And you, dear soul, are being prepared for something far greater than the place they left you. You will not be remembered for the pain they caused. You will be remembered for the strength you gained, and you will rise, not in noise, not in revenge, not in bitterness, but in a strength that only silence and God could have ever built. You didn't ask for the wound. You didn't invite the silence. You didn't deserve the denial, but you stood in the wreckage anyway, trembling, breaking, yet refusing to disappear. And that, right there, is the proof of something sacred. God never left you, even when they did. While they acted as though nothing happened, heaven recorded everything. While they built a life on forgetfulness, God began building yours on truth. While they turned away from the damage they caused, God turned toward you to bind your heart, to restore your worth, and to remind you that healing is not weakness, it is war. And you've been winning it quietly, faithfully, and beautifully. Let them pretend, let them perform, let them rewrite the pages they tore, because your healing doesn't come from their honesty, it comes from God's faithfulness. And the silence they thought would bury you, it became the soil of your transformation. You are no longer who they walked away from, you are who God is walking with now. And that, my friend, is a story no one can deny. Because it was written not by their version of the truth, but by the hand of God Himself. So rise in that truth, walk in that peace, and never again question your worth based on the memory they refused to carry. God saw it all, God is healing it all, and God will use it all for glory.